Welcome to this month's ITA Clean Sport Education webinar on a coach's role in clean sport. And my name is Dilan Karach, and I'm a member of the education team at the ITA. And to get the most out of today's webinar, we are offering translations in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish, asking your opinion and testing your knowledge by using the poll questions. And we have already one for you on the next slide. We will also answer your questions live at the end. You can write them at any time in the session, but the earlier the better. And we are recording this session. As mentioned, let's get you already interactive by launching our first poll questions. So the questions to you is, can a coach influence the doping behaviors of others? You have three options. Yes, no, or not sure. And just remember, your answer to poll questions are anonymous. But for now, it's already great to see this enthusiasm, as over 90% of you responded yes. Okay, let's close the poll and share the result with the audience. So, no matter your answer, our panelists coming up soon will provide practical tips and share their experiences on how coaches can take an active role in clean sports. So, research tells us that coaches, other athlete support personnel, and peers who have a close and trusted relationship with an athlete are most influential with respect to doping-related decisions. Values and subsequent behaviors are influenced by our environment and the people around us. And the situation of an athlete and their relationships can either be preventative of doping or facilitate doping, even unknowingly through the motivational climate that is created. Therefore, coaches and other athlete support personnel can influence doping behaviors. But to delve into this further and understand how coaches can actively promote clean sport and be protective agent against doping, I am delighted to introduce to our panelists Claire Lane and Benjamin Maier. So Claire is the Clean Sport Education Officer of UKAD, the UK National Anti-Doping Organization, and she has years of experience working with athletes across many sports. And she advocates that athlete education should be the first step in an athlete's interaction with anti-doping. Today, she will present the role of a coach and highlight a recent study on athlete support personnel. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Dylan. Hi, everyone.
Next up, we have Benjamin, who is an Olympian in bobsleigh who represented the Austrian team in the last three Winter Olympic Games. And he was recently a coach for the Austrian team at Gangwon 2024. His family is composed of Olympians, as he has two brothers who also competed at Olympic Games in skeleton. Today, he will also share his experiences on how coaches can take an active role in clean sport. Hi, Benny.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks both Claire and Benny for being with us today, and we will hear from you very soon. So before I go any further, I am pleased to offer our thanks to our official presenting partner, Inform Sport, whose support of these webinars allows us to deliver them free of charge to the clean sport community across 5 languages. Inform Sport is the global certification program for supplements that batch test products for substances prohibited in sport. As supplement contamination continues to be one of the leading causes of inadvertent doping, we encourage athletes, coaches, and athlete support personnel to check all products before use at sport.wetestyourtrust.com. And as a final housekeeping point before we jump in, a kind reminder that all our sessions, we encourage debates, interactions, and questions, but we do not tolerate any kind of aggressive behavior or abusive or racist language. Therefore, we trust that you all join us in the spirit of fairness, respect, and integrity. But now, on to today's topic. So coaches and other athlete support personnel who have a close and trusted relationship with an athlete have a significant and influential role in clean sport. Establishing how a coach can exhibit effective anti-doping behaviors is critical for the protection of athletes and clean sport. But for now, let's hear more from a coach's role from Benjamin. With his background, as he has so much to share with his experience. Thank you, Benny, for being with us. And maybe the first question I have for you: what does clean sport mean to you?
Well, to me as an athlete and now as a coach, clean sport builds the foundation for everything else that comes on top of that. So having the opportunity to perform at your very best, to show how hard you've worked, how much dedication you put into the sport, I think clean sport, therefore, is the pillar where everything else stands up upon. To me as an athlete, I always looked at clean sport and sport more for as a protection for the athlete themselves. I think especially when you're younger and you want to be like world champion, Olympic champion, you try to do everything that you get better and ideally as quickly as possible. And you ask everyone for help. And by having rules in place that like the anti-doping rules, this helps to protect me as an athlete and fellow other athletes that you might not go down a path that could be harmful or potentially damaging in the long term. So I always thought for myself, it was always a really good thing because it protects me that I can be healthy and enjoy performing and doing the sport that I love. And I think also in sport as an athlete or as a coach, you're always a role model. Whether you like it or not, there's people that look up to you. There's people that are asking you questions and want to follow your footsteps. And as an athlete, I always ask myself the question is, how do I want to portray the sport that I love to the outside world? And like, what kind of legacy do I want to leave behind? Or even like when I was still an athlete, how do I want people to look, in my case, to the sport of bobsled? And I think clean sport, as I said, is like the foundation for everything that will come then.
So yeah, so you mentioned something about role model, Benny, and the fact that to have someone to protect the athletes. Maybe before we go to our next section, question, because you have an interesting story to add about your father and your brothers who are also Olympians.
Yes, I was. So growing up, I have two brothers, and one used to compete in skeleton, and one is even competing today at World Championships. And we all have been at the Olympic Games. And so on top of that, my dad was the Austrian head coach for bobsled and skeleton. And so at least if anyone was wondering how you end up in the sport of bobsled, this is how I got there. But for us, it was growing up. There was always, my dad had very clear values and standards as to if you work hard enough, period of time, you eventually succeed and you will achieve the goals that you have. And so I always had those values, even growing up, competing with my brothers. But then also later on, when he was our coach, it was a smooth transition. And so for me, the environment that I grew up, it was always like the doping was not really a thing. Yeah.
So it seems that you were also lucky to have the role model with thanks to you to your dad, and I'm sure we will have something coming up very soon. So the second question I have for you is that throughout your career as an athlete, how did your coaches, with, for example, your father, support your clean sport journey? What can you say to our audience today?
Well, the one thing that I have not realized when I was an athlete, but then later on as I transitioned into coaching, was the great network that my dad and all the other coaches have created around me. Like when I entered the sport and I had questions or I needed some help that was maybe outside of just a physical training, or there was always someone that we were provided to talk to. So, for example, in the sport of bobsled, it's really important to have a high body weight, so up to 110 kilos. And when I started this process, I was nowhere close to that weight. And so the coaches said, okay, we have to gain weight, we have to get stronger. But we were never just given the statement on its own and saying, like, okay, you have to get stronger. Now go out and figure it out yourself. Or same with getting heavier. It was more like, okay, we have to get heavier. And then the coaches sat down with us and they said, okay, this is an appropriate amount of weight that we can gain, which was in my case was 3-4 kilos. And then they would also explain to us how they will adapt with the strength and conditioning training to facilitate that weight gaining. They organize education on nutrition, on how we might change our diet or what we can look out for. So for me, with my coaches, they always integrated us into the training process. They were telling us, this is the goal, this is how we think you can get there, and also this is how long we think it will take. Especially as a younger athlete, patience is something that you have to learn. And by incorporating and involving us into the training and planning process, it really helps us as an athlete to be guided and navigated that way. And I think one other thing was also along my sporting career, our coaches actively seek to get some kind of education always for us as athletes. They organized a diploma school for us athletes that was just the physical, the nutrition. So they wanted to make sure that we also learn what they want us to teach, that we understand why we are doing certain things. And so this was more the environment that I was in.
So yeah, so you mentioned the things with planning, having clear goals and steps on how to achieve them. So I guess the fact that when you were training and competing, because we may have many coaches and athletes in the webinar. For you, what was the culture of your environment, and how did this facilitate clean sports?
Well, as I said, like the environment was that our coaches, everyone, they had clear standards and rules, and they reinforced them. They were very clear on what is tolerable, and they set the tone for the language and wording that we used within the session. And as I mentioned earlier, a big part for me was that they always included us into the process, because as an athlete, I always felt like I have those questions. The question is, how can I get to the world championship level? How can I have an Olympic medal? And so I'm turning to my coach with those questions, hoping that they can answer my questions. And one thing that I enjoyed with my coach is that most of the time they did have questions, but sometimes answers, but sometimes they didn't have the answers, but they helped us, or they brought in people that might know the answer to our question. So it was really a very participative environment. Like we could ask our questions, and through this process, by explaining to us, okay, how we're getting there, what are the plans and methods of going to world championships, for example, we also learned and understood that any progress doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And this is building the trust into the coach-athlete relationship over time. And I think like this was primarily the environment that I was in as an athlete.
That's very interesting because you mentioned that you had this co-constructive like environment approach, that you were part. It seems like you were like working alongside next to your coach to your project, because for example attending Olympian Games is a project and you are part of the project. And it seems that it also mirrors the terms holistic environments. And at some point, you during, for example, your training process, you had maybe some downtimes. So what, for example, did your coach do to help you go towards your projects before the next question?
Well, as I said, like if I understand correctly, it was like being part of everything. But also the coaches, they not merely looked at me as an athlete when I was competing, but also as the person. So what I have learned from them is that every athlete eventually will have like tougher times. There could be financial or family, but there are stressors that are also coming outside of the sporting realm. And through this entire process, and that happens over years of building that trust, the coaches are very sensitive on how I felt or how other athletes felt. And whenever they felt like, okay, we need some time off, or they were very quickly to adapt and maybe took out a training session or did some exercise that we enjoyed. But they always sat down with us and created an open conversation. Okay, where is this coming from? Why do you have those feelings? And over the years, this became a really nice environment that if I had a bad result or whatever, or sometimes even I had no idea where my emotions are coming from, but being able to talk it through with the coach, and the coach quickly adapting everything to not just me as an athlete, but looking at me as a person, that really helped me in this entire process.
So yeah, this is very powerful what you mentioned, that your coach, so you appreciated that your coach had considered you as a person first, and then as an athlete. But now, as you have another hat, so as you are a coach now, you work with young athletes. So what do you do now to promote clean sport and integrity?
Well, I think what I'm trying to do is everything that I have experienced, like all this fortunate situation, what my coaches have created for me, passing that on to the next generation. I help them creating the environment. I want to help them understanding why clean sport matters, why it is for their benefit, why it is for their own protection. And as I said, with my coaches, I want to be the coach. I want to help them as much as I can. I want to have them being able to have open conversations with me, and also making sure that they get education as I'm getting it. I'll pass it on, so to educate my athletes as well. And really also for me, like, as I said, when my coach is looking at the whole person, and I work with a lot with very young athletes. And so I know they are not so patient. They want to be like top of the world right away. And it is sharing that experience, that the success or failures or everything that I had in my career was a process that took time over years. And by kind of helping them and navigating them through this entire process, and as I said, facilitating and creating that network for them, and bringing in the right people that if they have questions that they can trust, that I can trust, but also protecting them from temptations or shutting out people that are not good for the athlete's environment.
And maybe I was wondering, you work with young athletes, so maybe you can also use values to base on to go towards the clean sport journey. So maybe my next question to you is that how do you help young athletes, for example, in creating the right values?
Well, I think one of the things is it really like being a role model. And as I said, the athletes, when I was an athlete or them, they come to me, they think that I know the answers, that I know the path. And as a coach, I can help them to guide them along that path. And with my young kids that I train, I usually bring out Uno cards with me. And with the Uno cards, depending where you're from, everyone has their own rules on how they like to play. And if we don't all have the same rules, if we don't play the same rules, people get frustrated. And so just by playing that card game, they understand why rules are a crucial part of everything, why it matters that there are safety or protection, why there are rules in place. And I really want them to understand, as I said, that all of that is, in my view, primarily also for their protection, to maintain the integrity of the sport. So eventually we can go out there, perform at our very best, and show all of our hard work and dedication paid off.
So as you mentioned, with like these cards, like you who know, just before you mentioned your father also as a role model. Right now, as a coach, are you like referring to him a lot, to what he has taught to you?
Yes, it is a very blended in relationship, because I'm not only, I had the transition from being his athlete to now being a coach, but I was also his son. And now I also have kids. And so a lot of things that I realize now as a coach, and challenges that come up, I have not thought of when I was an athlete. And now I can go to him and ask him, okay, like how did you do those things? And how would you have done that? Or so it really helps me understanding. And he still, even though he's not a coach of mine, but he still is a role model in me, in that way, that I want to make sure that everything that I got as an athlete, where I was so lucky to have this environment, to pass that on. And also getting some information, okay, what did not work when he wanted to create it, and how can I potentially even improve that. But I think you would have to ask my athletes, but I I do think I refer quite often to him, and also all the other coaches that I had along the line, because as I said, as an athlete, I was always fortunate enough to be surrounded by very, very competent and good people.
Yeah, so for example, you mentioned things about like receiving information. So I guess it is important for coaches to be engaged with educations, but so why it is important? That's my next question.
Well, for me, I personally am a big believer in education, and as I said, when I was an athlete, we had all the levels. We had to go through all the levels of a coaching diploma, and I had finished my MBA when I was still an athlete. Currently studying medicine, and so I do believe that there never is an end of learning, and some things that I'm learning today might not be valid in 3 years or 2 years even. And so I think the one part is just staying up to date on everything. But also sometimes when I listen to other people, when I hear different stories, I recognize a situation that seems familiar to me where I struggled, and they offer or provide a different approach and a different outcome, or they share their experience and their wisdom. And I always think, like, even though I have been in the sport for a little while, but most of my coaches, they have experienced so much more. And I am very lucky that to have a great relationship and that I can ask them. And so I'm always trying actively to find additional education. You'll always learn something new. And I always thought of it in a way that it provides me with more tools. If an athlete comes with a question, so the quantity of my tools will improve, but also the quality of the answers that I'll give. And so I think just for any coach or even an athlete or whatever, to maintain and to make sure to get additional education will always be beneficial.
So yeah, so in a way, you never stop learning. As a summary, and also maybe as with your background, so you mentioned that you were also quite lucky in terms of the environments, and that's why maybe let's bring Claire to this to maybe ask your feedback, Claire, on Benny's experience.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. That was great, Benny. Really good to hear how your experiences as a coach and as an athlete under your father as a coach, and now your approach in that coaching role. Yeah, obviously you grew up in a very supportive environment and had, like you say, all those resources around you. So you're extremely lucky, extremely fortunate. However, unfortunately, that's not always the case. So yeah, but great to hear.
Yeah, great. But maybe thank you, Claire, for your feedback. Please do stay on camera, as I will straight over to you to present the role of a coach and highlight the study. And Benny, we look forward to having you for a roundtable after Claire's presentation. So Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dylan. Yeah, so I mean, Benny has covered quite a lot of what I wanted to cover today, but it'd be good just to reiterate, and we'll be able to reflect on what Benny was saying as I go through. I just wanted to start with this quote that's on the screen at the moment, because it quite nicely leads into the things that I want to talk about. So there was some research conducted around athletes and their perceptions of their coaches, and we said athletes were found to say that elite sports people, so those elite athletes, not only viewed their coaches as inspirational and knowledgeable, but they also identified them as being obeyed without question, which sounds quite harsh, but it really builds on that trust, that position of trust and authority that a coach has over an athlete. The athlete expects that they'll have their best interests at heart, at the centre of everything they do, but quite clearly, unfortunately, over many decades, there's been high-profile cases where that hasn't been the case for a variety of factors. Lots of factors in play. Some of them where the athletes are in their most vulnerable moments, others where the coaches and other support staff create a vulnerable time for that athlete. It has been found through research with UKAD that some coaches do defer those clean sport responsibilities in particular to other members of the support staff. So they may prefer to signpost to the sports medicine or other staff amongst the personnel team. But in a way, that is the coach failing to meet the expectations of their athlete. They are the one constant other than their parents. Typically, a coach may follow an athlete right through their career and through that athlete pathway. And so they have an expectation to meet. Obviously, we do need to remember that an athlete remains strictly liable for anything that is found within their body. But yeah, the coach has a key influence there. There are some responsibilities of the coach. If we can just move on to the next slide. There are some responsibilities under the World Anti-Doping Code that a coach has, and they're listed here. Essentially, it's about having an awareness of the rules and the anti-doping rule violations that apply to the athletes and to them as coaches and the rest of their support team. Making sure they don't engage in any personal conduct that conflicts their responsibility as a coach, where they have to discourage doping, not encourage it. Helping to alleviate any fears with or around the testing process that athletes may have. So the coach is critical in that role, and also being vigilant and acting on any concerns around doping. The one that I want to focus on today, if we just move on, is the fact that the focus being on the powerful influence of the coach upon athlete behaviour. So Benny spoke a lot about it in his interview there, about it all being about embedding clean sport habits and supporting athletes appropriately. He felt it, and he's now passing that on to his athletes. So at this point, before I move on to talk about that responsibility per se, I'd like to get some feedback from the audience today, if that's okay. Whether you're a coach, an athlete, or any other member of the support network around athletes. So it's on the screen now, and I just want you to reflect on what you heard from Benny, and also your own interactions with athletes and teams, and let us know what is your approach to clean sport. So if you can choose two of those that are shown on the screen there, that would be great. We get a real feel for coaching philosophies and your approach to clean sport. Everyone will have their own approach across the support network, and there'll be varying priorities. As I've already said, some coaches will defer it on to other members of the support team. The head coach may be someone that prefers to look at being a role model and building that clean culture. As a strength conditioning coach may look at sharing and instilling knowledge with the training programs so that athletes can be a little self-sufficient. The sports medicine doctors and the physios may look at making sure they don't take any shortcuts with any treatments, and making sure that again they're aiming for that level playing field. So how are we doing with the results coming in? Hopefully we're getting a few responses. Are we able to get the results in now? Has everyone finished voting? There we go. That's great. We've got a real mix across the board here, right from being a role model, coming up as the top one, with 64% of you saying you as a coach or someone who may interact with a coach, you expect them to be a role model and building that culture, with fewer aiming for the reporting of doping concerns, which is an interesting one. Essentially, there are no wrong answers here. Everybody will have their own approach. What matters is that all of those approaches will show across the support team and that network around the athlete, and will be a positive influence no matter what you choose or how you choose to go about it. So there are no wrong answers unless you completely disregard your responsibility under the World Anti-Doping Code. So that's great. We'll move on from the poll. So back to that responsibility that I want to delve into today. I just want to look at breaking it down a little bit. So it was quite a lengthy one. We'll look at the first part, positively influence athletes' behaviour. What does that actually mean? Well, I think Benny summed it up quite nicely, in that coaches have got a significant influence on the athletes and the rest of the support team. It starts with the coach, and the athletes will have an expectation. I think we've gathered that. They have expectations of their coach. So again, Benny said it, act as a role model, be a role model, do the right thing, and essentially being a clean sport ambassador. Not only are you developing athletes, again, Benny alluded to this, you're developing people that will be out in society and making decisions. So it's about setting the moral compass in the right direction, being part of that influence upon society. And that all comes from knowing those rules. You can only be that positive influence if you know the rules, stick to the rules, and always reiterate and apply them, including reiterating to the athletes that it is strict liability on them, although remembering they do have rules that will affect or impact and apply to the coach and support personnel. And the second part of that responsibility was all about fostering the attitude. So if we just move on to the next slide. And this is more about developing and reinforcing positive values. And again, Benny mentioned the values that shone through with his father and all the other coaches around him, and what he's trying to do with his young athletes now. At UK Anti-Doping, we have our own values that spell out the word pride. So we have passion, respect, integrity, determination, and more importantly, enjoyment. And it's good to see that a lot of those values do come through coaching philosophies as well. So it's all about reinforcing those, about nurturing that culture of personal excellence and not letting the win at all costs approach override it. Promoting informed choices, making sure athletes are well informed, promoting the fact that there's signposting 2 different support channels, making sure that they're able to manage the risks that are around them, be it with the supplements or medications. If those risks are managed by signposting to those support channels, then that is fostering those anti-doping attitudes throughout the team or athletes that you're working with. However, it is crucial that coaches know how to spot those potential risks, and that ability to know and recognise athletes at risk is a key one. So if we just move on, may have seen this image before. It comes from WADA. We refer to these points where an athlete may reach a challenge or an obstacle along the way. There could be a moment of vulnerability. This image does show there are many transitions and challenges along the way, from being a child athlete right the way through to podium. And some of those may come along in the form of peer pressure, be it from their teammates or training partners, parents even. Other challenges may be regards changing environment. So it could be moving from home where you're in a club situation, going off to a university where you may be more in a talent development situation, or an athlete may be lucky enough to be on the cusp of being selected for senior squads. And so they're going from junior to senior and they're seeking that senior squad selection. So again, that could be quite a challenging time. Equally, as we all know, athletes will at some point go through some kind of injury, and there will be a rehabilitation program alongside that. And there'll be another range of support staff. We've already mentioned the sports doctors, the physios, that will help that athlete in that rehabilitation period. However, there could be pressure for them to return quickly, recover quickly from that injury, which again puts them in that moment of vulnerability. How do I do this quickly? I'm a key part of this team, or my squad selection relies on it. So it's critical that the coach can recognise those moments and then know how to recognise those challenges. What is the challenge here? How can the coach support the athlete to overcome the challenges there? And that may be, in the case of peer pressure, it may be that there's some education. And again, Benny mentioned the importance of that education and just advocating for education, making sure everybody is on the same page. Everybody is aware of this, what is required and their responsibilities to support their athlete and what the athlete expects. In the case of trying to change an environment or seeking to reach a senior squad, it may be that an athlete is looking to gain size, as again Benny spoke about, and it's not just gain size and that's it. It's about seeking that accredited guidance, which might be a nutritionist in this scenario, alongside a strength and conditioning coach. The two working together, keeping the athletes at the heart of everything they do. And then when it comes to the rehab situation, the rehabilitation from injury, making sure that the doctors and the physios make sure all those processes are followed appropriately in terms of any treatment that an athlete may need to undergo, making sure any therapeutic use exemptions are in place if they need it, as well as any supplements being checked if they are going to be used in that recovery process. So again, the coach needs to be well informed. The athlete expects the coach to be well informed. They're trusting that the coach can help guide them through all of these moments of vulnerability. That is their expectation. We've spoken a lot about the athlete, and I don't think Benny really alluded to it, but there are pressures on coaches as well that come from just the innate nature of being a coach and being the leader of that team, and the performance of the team or of the athlete, individual or together. That has a direct indication of the coach's own performance. So there's a pressure for them to perform. There's a pressure for the team to perform, to reflect well on the coach. Achievements will mean promotions. Promotions will mean there'll be opportunities. Success breeds opportunities that may come from sponsorship. Medals will bring sponsorship opportunities as well. It comes to a point where maybe those demands, those financial demands, the implications of not succeeding are just too much, and that comes down quite hard on a coach at times. How the coach manages any time where there's defeat, failure of an athlete to perform in any particular scenario, how they manage that is really crucial. And unfortunately, we do see, particularly in team sports, where jobs can be at stake. So the job security of the coach could be a huge pressure. So we've just listed just a handful here of some of the moments of vulnerability that a coach may go through themselves. And they need to be able to navigate those in a safe, sensible manner, knowing where to go, take themselves off to, where can they seek support and guidance, whilst keeping themselves within the rules. So it's not just about navigating the right path for their athletes. Benny did mention about education and the importance of it in his interview. And in UKAD, UK Anti-Doping, we have our own education approach. All of the issues that I've raised, the topics I've raised around building that culture, being that role model, understanding the causes of doping and how to tackle those challenging situations and access those support channels, that they're all included in what we refer to as our mindset modules within our clean sport curriculum. We also include some foundation knowledge around the expanding landscape of iPads and psychoactive substances, which unfortunately are becoming more and more around in the athletes' environments. We do have e-learning, and we work with our national governing bodies. We work with our higher education institute partners, and the people that are going to major games, so the coaches and the support personnel that are going to major games, such as Paris later this year. We work with all of those to ensure the coaches are educated to an appropriate level, and we're trying to encourage them to be proactive in their engagement. So we're working with partners outside of those bodies to try and create opportunities for coaches to talk to each other, to learn, to listen, share best practice, really enhance their own practice by learning from others. And again, Benny alluded to this earlier in terms of what he learns from coaches. So yeah, really it's a case of staying informed, keeping yourself informed, being engaged with any opportunities that come your way as a coach. So hopefully I've given some food for thought, an opportunity for you to reflect on the back of what Benny was saying as well. It's safe to say we're coming from the same place, and hopefully you can reflect on your own engagement and why it's important. So back to you, Dylan.
Thank you very much, Claire, for presenting in such a helpful manner. But maybe I ask Benny to turn his camera and micro on for a quick roundtable before the live Q&A, because you may have seen we have interesting questions in the Q&A. So maybe first question, maybe to you, Benny, what should an athlete expect from their coach?
Well, I think like as a coach, as I said, you are someone that the athletes go with questions and hoping that you can help them and providing a pathway and guiding them towards their goals that they might have. And so I think what they should expect from a coach is being someone that might have the answers, but actually just being someone that knows where to go to find out the answers and what people to bring into the boat and to help them get to the goals that they have.
Great. So yeah, so for example, that the athlete, that they have someone that they can talk to guide them if they want to find a specific information. Maybe Claire, do you want to jump in on Benny's feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I would back up everything that Benny just said. It's also about, I think, creating that positive culture and environment so that an athlete feels confident to come forward and ask those questions, regardless of whether they think their coach will have the answer or not. That positive, supportive environment, where they can ask a question and they can rely upon their coach, to signpost them or point them in the right direction is I think exactly what they would ask. And I think having an athlete would expect to work with a coach and a support team that has the same values as them, so they can work together, collaborate together, all for the common goal. And question and answer situation is all part and parcel of that.
So maybe if we go on with you, Claire, to have your comment on that for us is like all athletes should have the right to be part of a clean sport environment and not feel any pressure to take shortcuts. For example, Benny mentioned that he was also lucky with his environment. What can you tell about that?
I mean, if I was talking to athletes right now, I would say they need to make sure they have a broad spectrum of people around them, so that they don't become blinkered with the one approach. Just in case, it's not a case of don't trust anybody, but if the broader the people and the network team around you, the better chance you've got to make sure you're going to hit the right goal in the right way. So yeah, I think just from a coach perspective, again, drawing on the expertise of those around you to create that supportive environment for the athletes. Really do keep the athlete at the heart of everything, and remember your own responsibilities, and don't risk breaking down that trust relationship with the athletes.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So maybe we will go straight to our live Q&A, because you may have seen we have interesting questions. But before, just a reminder for coaches, and for example, I'm mentioning the strict liability principle, because you as a coach, you have a role and responsibility to support an athlete, but ultimately the athlete is solely responsible for everything that they use and that is found in their body in the event of an anti-doping rule violations. And in the meantime, coaches are also liable for some anti-doping rule violations. So while you coaches, you need to direct your athletes, you also need to know how to protect yourself too. So that's just for wrap up before we go now to our live Q&A. So first questions we have comes from, I guess, someone from Nepal. So how long it took to athletes can develop their career with underdeveloped countries like Nepal, because athletes, they want to their name and fame in international area without anti-doping. Maybe let's start with you, Benji. What can you what would be your thought picturing yourself as an athlete related to this question?
Well, I obviously don't know about how the situation is in Nepal, but so when I started in the sport of bobsled, the average age of athletes was 25 to 35. So those were all fully grown up, developed athletes. And by the late 1990s, early 2000s, the sport of bobsled had not the best reputation. And so in order to be competitive and in the sport of bobsled, in the early 2000s, that's when they started with a youth development program in my case. So we started all with skeletons, so that's head first down the bobsled track. But it gave us, or my coaches, it gave them an angle to start earlier with the entire training process, because it takes so long to drive that good and to gain that weight. And so for us, it really was shifting the attention of working with athletes in their 20s rather than to starting earlier with the athletes, and therefore having more time to build the athletes and to learn proper technique and like everything that goes along. And so, and this is also what I meant with work with a lot of young athletes, because we want to make sure to have the time that we can develop them. And by the time that they are old enough that they go on to Olympic Games and whatever, we didn't have a 1-2 year time frame where we had to rush everything, but rather had over the duration of multiple years, we could build that up. So I don't know, it potentially could be an idea to look out and that you can start earlier with the athletes that you work with.
Claire, maybe to you from like maybe like with a national anti-doping organization perspective, considering, for example, maybe the Nepal and other countries in this situation, what could you share on that?
I mean, for those countries that are in this situation and they're underdeveloped, it's reaching out for as much support as they can from maybe nations that have been in a similar position, maybe relatively recently, because the organizations globally that could have helped them 20 years ago might not be the same organizations that could help them now. So yeah, trying to gather, just as we say with the coach, you know, if an organization needs support, if a coach needs support, try and develop that network of people around them. So if they can develop that support around themselves, they will ensure that they're doing their best for their athletes.
Okay, thank you, Kila. And I guess we have one interesting from Aude. Maybe we start with you, Claire. Do you have like tangible exercises that help athletes experience the value of patience and trusting the process? Because sometimes, yeah, we say words are not enough.
Oh, I mean, we have lots of exercises that we do. It's hard to go into them specifically, but we have lots of outreach activities that we can do. Things in a classroom as well. We spend a lot of time talking about scenarios, so putting them in a scenario to actually talk through what they may do, who they might want to talk to in a situation. I see one of the other comments had been about, you know, athletes wanting to be big and they want the results now. So, you know, again, trying to put them in that scenario, making them understand what it is what it takes to get to that situation. Then they might start to understand that there is patience and there is a process that you've got to go through. So I think, you know, those scenarios have proved really helpful from our perspective in terms of clean sport education exercises.
Maybe any on-site experiences, like do you have like any tangible exercises that you could share from your perspective?
Well, I don't necessarily have a tangible exercise, but I feel like the same with patience and trusting the process. I think also on the coach's side that trust is something that doesn't happen overnight. It's like by being a role model, having open conversations with your athletes, and it develops along the line. Like trust is not something that you instantly get, but rather than through a course of actions and open communication, the closest that I can think of right now would be what I mentioned earlier, is to including the athletes into the entire process so that they have a better understanding on why this takes so long, why your body, for example, needs a certain amount of time to adapt to the strength and condition and training, and that this is a natural biological event. And I feel like this, at least for me and my athlete, it seems to help to understand and trust the process a little bit more.
Thank you, Benny. I can see the time is coming, but maybe we go with one question before your final words. We have one interesting question from El Zayed, which is, what is the optimal way, or what would be a way to involve national coaches in the clean sport education process? Maybe Claire, what would be your ideas on that?
As I've said, we have our education that is free e-learning. That's our scalable option. That's what we can put out to all coaches, and anyone across the world can access that. But it's also key that those coaches reach out to their governing bodies. Certainly in the UK, there are educators based within those governing bodies of sport. So take bobsleigh and bobskeleton. They will have their own educator that will work with the athletes and the support personnel in that area. Take the opportunities. We have coaching organisations that lead on the development of coaches, and they also engage with us as a NADO to put on opportunities, as we were talking about before, in terms of sharing the best practice, sharing your own experiences, learning lived experiences from others, and those kind of opportunities. If coaches can engage in those, then education is more than just sitting and listening in a classroom. It's about sharing and hearing.
Thank you, Claire. And yeah, so I guess so for the questions remaining, just feel free to email us. Maybe we will just wrap up the Q&A with you, Benny. Any top tips for coaches and for clean sports?
Well, I think it has been mentioned a lot, but I think it's leading by example. Ultimately, as a coach, you create the environment, you create the communication environment. So really showing strong values and reinforcing them with the athletes you train. Also helping and creating a network, bringing in people that athletes and you as a coach can trust, that work all with the health and of the athlete in mind. And as I mentioned, is to incorporate the athlete into the whole training process and how you think they will achieve the goals that they have set for themselves.
Thank you, Benny. Claire, any final words also you want to address to our audience?
I was just going to say that we've spoken a lot about the moments of vulnerability, those vulnerable moments that an athlete or coach may find themselves in. And from my perspective, if there's any ignorance of the rules or their responsibilities that comes purely through a lack of knowledge, then that needs to be addressed, because that's leaving them in the most vulnerable position, really. So education is key. Remembering that coaches and all other ASP are in those key positions of influence to really put that positive influence on athletes' behaviour.
Claire, Benny, massive thank you for your final words and for your participation. You mentioned a lot about education. So maybe the question I have for the coaches here, what happens after attending this session? So for example, you can use the WADA e-learning platform named Adele. For example, we highly recommend 2 e-learning courses, both available in different languages. We have coaches of high performance education programs and Paris 2024 Olympics for those attending this edition. And there are, of course, many more materials available on Adele, or you can also contact your NADO. Also, if you want to test your knowledge, feel free to scan the QR code, as we included some case scenarios where coaches can help athletes. I will just pause here a few seconds so you can scan the QR code. And on the next slide is the main places I will point to. If you want to have more information on what we covered today, you can see on the slide that there are also resources related to UKAD, to what they offer. And we have two IT webinars coming up, and you can already save and share the dates. So March 25, focusing on whereabouts, because Benny, maybe for example, as an athlete, you had many questions on whereabouts, and we receive a lot of questions on whereabouts on that topic. So for you coaches and audience, you can be informed about the March webinar by registering to our newsletter, for instance. And May 30, for those interested or attending the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, the QR code will bring you to the registration link. So scan it, register, and share the link with your athletes and network. And finally, if you are interested in contributing to the future of clean sport education, the University of Birmingham is conducting a WADA-funded study evaluating the impact of the international standard for education. If you are interested in being interviewed for this study, please email Andy Hayes, whose contact details are on the slide for more information. And this wraps up today's webinar. But if you still have questions, you can always reach us at education@ita.sport. And after this webinar ends, you will receive a link to our survey alongside the presentation slides. We ask you to please take a few minutes to fill it out, as your feedback is very valuable to us. And if you would like to receive updates from the ITA, you can sign up using the QR code on the slide. Again, Claire and Benny, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for our audience. We hope that you, Claire and Benny, you enjoyed being on the journey with us, and to our audience that you found the session helpful and valuable. See you soon, everyone, and have a great rest of the week.